As for veganism during a societal collapse or in some extreme survival scenario, I've said it before and I'll say it again. All bets are off. In a true survival scenario where it is actually kill or be killed, especially if society as we know it has fallen and there is epic chaos abound, you do what you need to do to ensure your survival and the survival of those that you care about. Even if that requires forfeiting veganism, even if that also requires hunting and killing fellow human beings for sustenance. So, going back to what I said before, I'd even eat people in a true collapse. All bets would literally be off when it is kill or be killed, survival of the fittest, etc. This is why I lovingly refer to the far left, such as socialists or Antifa, as food tier or prey tier people. Feel free to hashtag those terms, by the way. Those bottom feeders will provide a plentiful source of sustenance if our typical food supply were to deplete or become inaccessible, and there's not a damn thing they'd be able to do about it either.
They're slow, either over or underweight, typically non-athletic, weak, cowardly, non-competitive, etc.
Easy friggin' targets, but would you honestly expect anything more from socialists? Dinner will be served.
And we are witnessing the gradual collapse of the West right now. The wheels are in motion and have been for some time. And this seems to be the desire of those in power for one reason or another. Many people today don't even recognize the myriad threats that are surrounding them, and they likely won't until something directly affects their personal lives in some manner, such as their children becoming the victims of a grooming gang, not someone else's. They are simply too comfortable and taken care of at the present to really notice, care, or plan for the future themselves, good or bad. People have generally become domesticated, entitled, complacent, etc. You have morons who will literally protest in favor of open borders and globalism on one hand, but hypocritically despise and moan about historical colonialism of, say, the British Empire on the other hand. Let them and their children, if they even have any, and their children's children, etc., drown in the sea of piss and shit that they've allowed to accumulate around themselves. Quite literally in some cases, like in progressive San Francisco, California, which is beginning to look more and more like a third world shithole. This reminds me of a quote by Rorschach from The Watchmen. "This city is afraid of me. I have seen its true face. The streets are extended gutters, and the gutters are full of blood, and when the drains finally scab over, all the vermin will drown. The accumulated filth of all their sex and murder will foam up about their waists, and all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, 'Save us!' And I'll look down and whisper, 'No.'" A collapse is inevitable on our current path. If the West truly collapses, the pathetic, degenerate, useful idiots such as screechy social justice warriors who are part of the disease will die off by one means or another, likely as a consequence of their boundless stupidity. And the estimated 10% who'd survive would be your fittest and most responsible, most resourceful, most intelligent, and most resilient. Certainly not what comes to mind when you think of, say, Antifa, commies, third-wave feminists, or low-testosterone males like those in BuzzFeed. Nature will take care of business for us. We need not lift a finger, and nature is a better motherfucker than any of us could ever hope to be.
À-bas-le-ciel.
This may seem like an unexpected comparison or frame of reference for this video, but I think it's a necessary and a useful one. Regular viewers of my channel will know that lately I have reached out to a vegan organization called Anonymous for the Voiceless. It's also associated with the term Cube of Truth. I reached out to them and I offered to talk to basically anyone in the organization. I ended up talking to someone who I'd say is at a mid-level in the organization, something like a regional director, not just a normal head of a chapter, not just a normal participant, but someone who's a few rungs higher up the ladder, someone who is in pretty regular communication with Paul Bashir. And in making excuses for the problems within the organization, and I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that really as a reproach, but part of what he was saying to me was offering excuses for problems they've had or things that have gone wrong. Something he said again and again was, these people are vegan. They're doing the best they can. You have to assume these are vegans, their hearts are in the right place, they have good motivations, they're doing the best they can. And I stopped him more than once to say, look, I really think you should question why it is you're saying that and what that really means. Now, the guy I was talking to knew me. I think he'd seen a couple of videos on my channel over the years. In that broad sense, he knew me. But he wasn't a regular viewer on my channel. And I was able to offer him sort of challenging examples. I said, on my channel, I have videos criticizing neo-Nazis who happen to be vegan. Really ardent, passionate supporters of Adolf Hitler who are vegan. If you'd seen any of those videos, and if you'd thought about even what those people are trying to do within the movement, some of them are not so overt with what their political agenda really is. Their influence is more insidious than it is sort of direct and earnest. Do you really think you'd be saying this? And naturally, it was sort of a response of like, well, yeah. Let's move on to the topic at hand here. I think that is, for anyone who's in this movement seriously for the long term, I think that's really worth thinking about pretty seriously. And then later this came up again, and I said, well, we've both had this experience with durian riders. We've both lived through it. We're both touched by this, unbelievable unfolding disaster within veganism that was the durian rider incident that for me ended up being a court case and so on and so forth. Would you make these excuses for durian rider that you just assume these people have only good intentions, knowing nothing else about the situation except that they are vegan? It's the most obvious thing in the world that vegans are people too. But maybe all of us want to buy into this myth that there's some fundamental value of compassion, empathy. I don't know, maybe that there's a kind of transcendental realization, like that we transcend the culture we're born into, the conditioning that eating meat is normal, drinking dairy is normal, and you're expecting to have some kind of profound kinship with these other people, where you can, in that sense, just assume that they have good intentions. Now, I say this in the context of you, my viewer, having just watched about 4 minutes and 20 seconds of a vegan bodybuilder fantasizing about murdering and eating other human beings when the collapse of Western civilization comes. There's a lot more that I could say about Cory McCarthy. There's a lot more that I could say about Tara McCarthy. And there are specific points made in this video I could refute as if they needed to be refuted. Like, his alleged parallelism between, illegal immigrants arriving from Mexico and the expansion of the British Empire through actually invading and conquering countries and engaging in the slave trade and buying and selling opium. Sorry, have you heard? British Empire was built on slavery and opium. Unlike the illegal immigration problem, or he's even against the legal immigration problem, of course. Anyway, it is what it is. But, for this video tonight, I really want to leave it at that most simple and fundamental warning. There's an old folk song by Woody Guthrie that ends with a warning. Some men will rob you with a 6-gun, and some with a fountain pen. There are people who have really damaged this movement from within. In my opinion, people like Peter Singer, who did it while wearing a suit and writing books and engaging in scholarly, discourse and forums. utterly respectable veneer. But I gotta tell you, I think Peter Singer is a terrible human being. And I think that shows in his philosophy and his words and his deeds and his whole career. And the impact he's had on veganism, short-term and long-term, is terrible. It's tremendously negative. Someone like Freely the Banana Girl was, I don't know, ostensibly respectable or ostensibly appealing. She was promising to help people lose weight and feel great and all these things. And she seemed harmless enough, jumping around in her bikini. People like Freely and her former boyfriend, Durian Rider, tremendously negative impact on veganism and tremendously negative impact on particular vegans and aspiring vegan activists, myself included, all around the world. Dragged the name of veganism through the mud and has had a negative impact, a negative legacy I'm still dealing with to this day. I'm still dealing with, for example, vis-a-vis, in relation to, Paul Bashir and Anonymous for the Voiceless and these other things. The conversations I have with other activists about getting organized, they're still tainted by that legacy. Not all racists are going to be so overt and so clumsy and so offensive as Cory McCarthy. You can see the earlier videos on this channel if they're not blocked or censored in your region, because many of them are now. You can see him stating unbelievably obvious, offensive things that nobody really needs to refute. You can see him indulging in the same kind of power fantasy on other topics. You can see that simply put, he's a bad person. He's a bad influence within veganism. He would be a bad leader. He absolutely should be shut out of any kind of leadership position or position of influence. But, there are a lot of other really worrying sources of influence. And sometimes they're going to appear as genteel spiritual gurus, and sometimes they're going to appear in a business suit with a fountain pen. And I'm worried. I'm worried because I've received emails from so many people who told me that they believed in Cory McCarthy until they saw my video exposing him as a racist, as someone who was pro-genocide and pro-British Empire, and who held these unbelievable views about, social Darwinism, white supremacism, etc., etc., And the problem isn't that I appreciate getting that kind of fan mail. Okay, thank you. I've talked to some of those people for whom I was, my videos were useful that way. The problem is that they had that faith in him in the first place. The problem isn't that my channel played this pivotal role in debunking Durian Rider. The problem is that guy used to sit on his kitchen floor, nattering incoherently, ranting like a madman. And he was still regarded as totally credible in the vegan movement. I still had to go through this process of challenging him, debating him, if you like, and debunking him. That people had to have their eyes open. And again, of course, I've gotten fan mail thanking me for that. And now, a very different example, someone like Unnatural Vegan. Still to this day, I get email and Facebook messages and this kind of thing thanking me, and people saying, wow, I didn't realize the extent to which what Unnatural Vegan is promoting is really anti-vegan or incompatible with veganism, or is kind of undermining veganism and destroying it from within. Okay, guys, I know some of you are going to be disappointed. You thought maybe you'd come here and see me poking fun at Cory McCarthy and Tara McCarthy, having a laugh at their expense. But I've got to say, the feeling that all the madness within the movement leaves me with, in the end, it's no laughing matter.
À-bas-le-ciel.